Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, muli muli wanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so honored and so wicked happy that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends, your kids, teachers, their guidance counselors, their librarians, all about the show. And please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Good Pods, Himalaya, Ghana, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Jessica Speer. She'll be here to celebrate middle school. Safety goggles advised. Before we invite Jessica into the studio, we want to invite all of the authors who are listening to join us at readingwithyourkids.com. There is a button at the top of the page that says Authors Click Here. When you click that button, you're going to learn how we can help you celebrate your book. First, scroll down to find out how you can be a guest here on the podcast. And in a long-form conversation, tell the world all about your fantastic children's book. It's fun, it's easy, and it doesn't cost a thing. Don't let everybody know about that. No, tell everyone. It doesn't cost a thing to be on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We also can let you know about our Certified Great Read program. If our panel believes that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a Certified Great Read. And with that status comes a number of really powerful tools that can let parents know that your book deserves a place in their family library. Oh, and we would also love for you to find out about our monthly promotion program. We can celebrate your book with commercials here on the podcast, with messages to our over 100,000 social media followers, display your book on our nationwide network of digital pedestrian billboards, and have your book present with us at whatever live event we are going to be celebrating that month. In August of 2022, we'll be at the Buttonwood Park Zoo in beautiful New Bedford, Massachusetts. Families are going to get a chance to see all of the books that are participating in our August promotion program. We hope that families will be able to see one of your books at an upcoming event. Learn all about that and more by going to readingwithyourkids.com, clicking on the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page. And if you're anywhere near New England on August 6th, come on down to the Buttonwood Park Zoo. Help us celebrate the release of episode 1500. Join us right now from the beautiful state of Colorado. Our guest is returning to the podcast to celebrate her brand new middle grade book. It's called Middle School Safety Goggles Advised. Please welcome to the show author and behavioral expert, I think is her title, Jessica Speer. Hey, Jessica, how are you?
Hey, Jedley. It's great to be on your show again. Thanks so much for having me. I'm doing really well.
Now, did I get your title correct?
Oh, I just call myself author, but okay. My background, I have a background in social sciences, and I love to dive into the social science perspective in my research process of my writing.
Well, one of the reasons I like having you on is because you do research. Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of authors come on the show who are addressing some really important topics that are facing kids. But a lot of their insights are based on their own personal experiences, which are very, very valid. I like it because I think you bring a different kind of perspective to it, that you've sat down and you've talked with kids and you've done some research. And so it's just not one person's view of a situation. It's more of a global perspective that has been analyzed to some point.
Yeah, and what I love to do is really dive deep in with the kids, the readers themselves. So that's where I start. I'm 2 generations out from this generation of kids, so I really need to connect with them and experience their world. So for this book, where I started was I went into 7th grade classrooms, because that's where things really start to get interesting, 6th and 7th grade, and I just asked classroom after classroom, hey, what is the trickiest thing about middle school? And that kind of opened the floodgates. I got bunches of responses. They were in small groups. Some of them wrote things down. I went from classroom to classroom, got a big stack of stuff that I then compiled and came up with the top 10 things that this day and age middle school students thought were the trickiest things about middle school. And then I went back for some deeper conversations about those things. And some things I found were sort of similar to my experience, and some things are really different. Like, I didn't have social media when I was in middle school, so that's really different. So yeah, it was so fun to write. I absolutely loved, chatting with the students. And what I found is, they are so wise. They really, really know what's going on. I think one of the trickiest things about middle school is sometimes, okay, they know what's going on, but how do you navigate that? Like, how do you actually deal with that gossip, or, dealing with this whole question of status and popularity? Like, they can kind of see the big picture, but it's those moving through that is where things get tricky and hard.
Yeah. You just mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned gossip.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned you're 2 generations away from this age group. I'm probably 5 or 6 generations away from it. But gossip has really changed in this era where, it might have taken 2 or 3 days or a week from, a piece of gossip to get through a whole school. It literally can take minutes for some gossip, not only to get through a school, but get through a whole community, get around the world.
Yes, and then it's out there too, So in our day and age, it would be there and then it's gone. A small group of people heard about this, then it went away. But then it's maybe out there in a big way on social media, and it's really hard to get rid of that. So yeah, I feel for kids in that way. I think it's a little more intense. So I have a whole chapter on gossip. It's called, Gossip and Drama O Rama. And what I like to do too is take, the kids' experience, but then blend that with the whole science behind that. Like, why do we gossip? Let's really unpack that. Let's shed a light on that. And some of it is, for this age group, they're really curious about their peers. They're trying new things. People are exploring identities. So some of that gossip is pretty innocent. Like, hey, did you hear what happened to so-and-so? Or, so-and-so got expelled. And some of that, there's no bad intention there. They're just really curious about their peers. Where it gets what I call in the book toxic is it's really one-sided. It's pretty mean, and it spreads pretty rampantly against somebody. And sometimes that's 2 personalities that really clash, or 2 people that are having a conflict, and instead of dealing with that conflict with each other, they're spreading that out there. So I wanted to let's just shine a light on that, and so let's make that differentiation so that we know that, hey, this is when this gossip gets really into this toxic arena, and, you don't have to get involved, and kids shared that with me too. So instead of me saying that, I use stories of kids that learned that, hey, I don't have to participate in that, and there's a choose your own ending story where a student sits down at a lunch table, and you can choose to share that story. You can choose to just stop it and change the subject. So there's lots of, ways in this book that help kids see how to navigate these tricky situations. There are some ways out that they might not yet know because they have never really dealt with this before. This is all new experiences for them.
Yeah. And you bring up another point I think that is so important to stress to our kids is once something is out there on social media, it is out there forever.
Yep.
And that's not an exaggeration. It is out there forever. Even if it's a Snapchat, something that's supposed to disappear and whatever, kids can take screenshots, and they do, and they share them, and they put it out there. So, yeah, real important it's real important to have a conversation with our kids, I think, to understand what social media is and how it can be used in a wonderful way and how people are using it to hurt others.
Yes, and I love that you said that. Those conversations with kids on a regular basis. It's not a one-time conversation. It's a regular conversation because, let's face it, the adolescent brain is not fully formed. So the last part of our brains to fully form is our prefrontal cortex, in the front of our heads. And that's where we have our executive functioning. That's where we make our best decisions and logical decisions. And so that's not formed, for boys up till, the early 20s. So yes, mistakes are made. But if we have these conversations on a regular basis, just reminding them, that, it's not a good idea to share that teachers and coaches, even colleges are looking at these things, and so the chapter on social media, the story that I share there, the choose your own ending story, and this I've heard over and over again is, the whole sexting thing. So sexting is sending a text message, explicit text message. It could just be a girl, in her bra or something, that's would be considered explicit. These are underage humans, sending that off because their boyfriend at the time might have said, hey, if you really liked me, you would send this, so this happens a lot. And, it just breaks my heart because, then inevitably it gets shared and, it's so heartbreaking for the families involved. And in some states, that's actually illegal too, because these are underage kids. So, kids don't understand the consequences of that. So, we as parents have to just really talk as much as we can with kids about that, not in a shaming, judgmental way, just about the reality of that. And so I often use it with my kids. If I do hear of a real story, we talk about that like, maybe it's in the news and it's like, oh my gosh, this is what happened. And so they can see that actually, yeah, this does happen. And we need to think about that before we make these, snap decisions.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I remember when my kids were in middle school, and we were talking about these issues and talking about the reality of, colleges are looking at your social media, your employers are going to look at your social media, and the response that I got back, I think was from my daughter was, well, that's not right, that's not fair, and I said to her, well, that doesn't matter. This is the reality. You have to deal with the world as it is, not how you would like it to be. You can work towards making it the way you'd like it to be, but in the meantime, this is the way it is. This is reality, and that's what you have to deal with.
Yeah, I talk about it. Yeah, I talk about social media as your billboard. This is your billboard about you. So what you put out there is creating the billboard about you. So, I always encourage kids to, use social media as a force for good, as a way to connect, as a way to create, as a, way to showcase, the cool stuff that they're doing. It's not a way to, it's not what we use to put other people down or, just mindlessly scroll. But it is a powerful tool, and it is the way the kids connect these days. So, it is here. It is here to stay. So kids love it. It's, they don't really make phone calls anymore. They snap their friends or they text their friends. So it's a really important communication tool with kids when they're ready, to take that on. Sometimes they're ready before the parents are. So that's a whole nother discussion. But it is here to stay. So the more we can talk about it with our kids so that they are just equipped and prepared and, good digital citizens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Last night I was with my 18-year-old niece, and we were out, and her mom asked her to get something, and when we got to the store, my niece didn't know if she wanted the red or the yellow, and so she is sending her a message on Instagram, a text message, and then she's sending a message on a regular text message, and then she's using another app, and I'm like, why don't you just give her a call? It'll be done in seconds. It could be over with. We'll be out of the store. What's going on? Well, I don't know what app she's going to be using. I could pick up the phone.
She won't pick up the phone gently. Of course she's not going to pick up the phone. No, I know. It's a new world. Yep.
Yes, indeed. What is the number one issue facing middle school kids?
Okay, so when I was asking students, what is the trickiest thing? The thing that came up the most was judgment of peers. So that is chapter 1. And I would like to say that that's probably them being, maybe not really secure in themselves and assuming people are judging them when they're not. But when I dove into the stories, no, it's a blend of that. It's a blend of, they actually are being judged by their peers, and they also think their peers are judging them when their peers are actually not judging them. So I talk about that as chapter 1, because I'm like, that's a great place to start. Let's talk about harshly judging, our peers and ourselves. And why do we do that as humans? So we tend to get into, our most judgmental places, when we're feeling threatened, when we're not feeling our most confident selves. So if we start there, of course that makes sense. That's middle school. We are not our most confident self. Everything just changed. Our bodies are changing. We're in a new school. Our friendships might be changing. So there, the sense I got from the students I talked to is, there is a lot of judgment as to what you wear and who you hang out with. And that's unfortunate. And I remember that from my own middle school experience. There's also a lot going on in middle schoolers' heads where they think they're being judged, and they're not. So bringing some awareness to that as well. But I start there with judgment. And, the story I talk about, there's a choose your own ending there of someone's trying to start a diversity club in the school and, how that plays out. Trying to create a space where there is less judgment. And, it's a club that's accepting people for who they are. Diving into some topics that are really hot today. What I love about this generation is they are more open to diversity. I think this generation has done some growth there. They really are open to more diversity than past generations have. And so I'm excited to where that goes. Maybe this will start to shift in these middle school years.
Mm-hmm. One of the thoughts that I had as we're talking about middle school, did you have a chance to talk to kids in different school settings? Here in the Boston Public Schools, there is a shift away from middle schools. In Boston, like a lot of cities, there was a K through 6 or K through 5, and then middle school 6 through 8, and then high school.
Yeah.
Now in the Boston Public Schools, they're getting away from that, and they're creating more K through 8 schools. My kids went to a K through 8 Catholic school, and I noticed that in that environment, there wasn't as much of the kind of middle school drama that we hear about. Is that something you were able to explore? Do you have any thoughts on that? Is the middle school less precarious when the 8th graders are in a K through 8 school, or is it the same?
And I wish I could speak to that, but I'm not sure. And you're right. Schools are thinking of different ways. Like, is it the best approach to take, this group 6 to 8 and put them in their own school with a large size number of students? There's a lot of exploration going on and some different models, as you said, which I love that they're exploring some different approaches there. But it really depends. I think there's a lot that goes into that. It goes into kind of the community. It goes into the culture of the school. So there's a lot that feeds into that. But with the concepts of the book, I think no matter what sort of setting you're in, you're going to relate to some of those things. So whether you're in a really small setting, in a unique, charter school, or in a big, traditional public middle school, you're probably going to experience some gossip. You're probably going to experience kind of the crushes and dating thing. You're going to, but they will experience it in different ways and in different levels. So it's interesting though to see these shifts in education and how different schools are doing it. And I do encourage parents to really think about what is the best fit for your child, for your student. Some students might thrive more in a smaller, more focused environment versus something bigger. So if you're in a community that has those choices, keep your eyes open to what might be the best fit for your student.
Yeah. I also like the fact that we're asking these questions and schools are taking a look at different things and trying to make the best outcome for kids. What's frustrating, though, is that I'm old enough to have been around when Boston first went from the K through 8 model to, we're going to shift and we're going to have middle schools and that's going to solve everything. And now here it's 15, 20 years later. It's like, that didn't work so well. Let's go back.
I know. It's a very expensive experiment. Yeah. There's a great book, actually. It's a adult book. It's called And Then They Stopped Talking to Me. And this author explores all of that, like what went into that transition from, what we used to do to this middle school system and where we're going from there. But it's super interesting to see how that all changed over the course of time and how we're in the midst of another change.
Yeah. Interesting that you mentioned the title of that book, Then They Stopped Talking to Me. that isolation and feeling excluded is something I think that affects a lot of kids, not only in middle school, but I think it's something that kind of gets magnified. Did you explore that at all?
Yes. And so that is there's 2 chapters that touch on that. One is, cliques and groups, and the other one gets into more, aggressive behaviors and bullying. And you're right, it is so painful because, humans have this need to fit in and belong. Like, that's a human need, is acceptance and belonging. And that need hits a peak in the middle school years, just at a time where everything's kind of, shifting, and our own identities, our friendship groups, maybe our school's shifting. There's so much in flux. So that's why it feels so bad if, say someone's in a group and all of a sudden there's a shift and they're feeling like they're on the outs. It feels terrible. It leaves really deep memories. A lot of people look back on their middle school and that's what they remember. They remember that feeling of, oh my gosh, I felt totally excluded and isolated. So those experiences are real, and because preteens are feeling those emotions in such big ways, they really feel that in a huge way. So yeah, I like to talk about, in the book I'm talking about groups. So, as humans, and talking about human behavior, we form groups. That's kind of how we evolved, groups. And sometimes awesome things come out of groups. Let's talk about the civil rights movement and things like that. So groups can be really, really positive. Groups can also be a way that we kind of divide each other up. And that's what we see sometimes in middle school. And it depends on the middle school, and it even depends on the groups. Some groups are pretty accepting. Some groups don't feel accepting at all. And so I just kind of shine a light on all that. And the ideal situation is that every kid has a good friend or some good friends that they feel like they're accepted and they're part of that group, and that group is also kind to other groups. That's the utopia. In the book I refer that as United Unicorns Middle School. I kind of reference that throughout the book. United Unicorns, this is how it would happen at United Unicorns Middle School. We would all be in that situation. That's unfortunately not the reality. It's not that simple. It's not that easy. But I think we can keep talking with kids about, keeping an eye out for the friendships that feel really accepting. And you might not be in that one. If you're feeling like you're in a group or you have a friendship that doesn't feel very safe or accepting, that might not be the one for you. So they might need to make you shift themselves. But realizing that is such a vulnerable place for kids, sometimes they'd rather stay in a bad friendship than shift, because that shift can be really terrifying. So what I've seen on the ground is these things kind of happen gradually. We as parents might be wondering, what is going on? Why are you hanging out with these people? And it might just be because they're kind of figuring out what to do and how to do that, how to maybe make a shift into a different group and things like that. Because it's tricky. It's a complicated, social dynamic that they learn to navigate in middle school.
Yeah. One of the things I remember when my daughter was in middle school, and also a comment that I heard traveling around in middle schools, performing around the country, oftentimes teachers will talk about a class, the 8th grade, has a personality. The group has a personality. I remember my daughter's class had a wonderful personality. They were really giving, really accepting, really inclusive. And one of the reasons that stood out so clearly was that the 6th graders, the kids that were a year or two behind them, were the opposite. So it was this glaring thing. Did you experience that, or is this something that you were able to look at as you were traveling around and talking to kids?
Yes, definitely. I agree with that statement that different classes have different sort of personalities. And so let's talk about popularity, because there's something really interesting that's going on there that feeds into this. Okay, so in early elementary school, kids don't care about popularity. 10%, if you're in early and elementary school, maybe 10% of kids feel that, popularity, in quotes, is more important than friendship. When you get to middle school, that jumps to over 25%. believe that popularity is more important than friendships. It kind of peaks in early high school, and then it starts to die down. So popularity becomes more important in middle school. But here's the interesting thing. There's a book by a researcher and professor, Dr. Mitch Pridstein. He wrote a book called Popular and studied this and studied all the research on it. And it turns out there's two kinds of popularity. And I found this in my discussions with students. There's one kind of popularity where the students are really well liked. They're leaders, but they're also kind. They make people feel good about themselves. They cooperate. And then there's another kind of popularity that Dr. Pridstein calls status. And status they tend to be more aggressive. Maybe sometimes they're nice, sometimes they're mean. They might admire them, but they're also afraid of them. And so that popularity, the status popularity, really shifts the dynamic. So some of these personalities we see in classes might be, the students that are, deemed to be, in quotes, popular. Are they more the well-liked? Because that's going to change, the personality of the class. Or do they tend to be the status kind of popularity where it's a little scary and there's some aggression there and, maybe, some antisocial behaviors, but also some really nice stuff. So it's kind of confusing for kids. So, there tends to be a mix of those within every single class. But if more of the kids are leaning towards these, the actually truly well-liked students, that is going to change the whole nature of that class. So I kind of crack that wide open in the book too. I'm like, let's talk about that because I think kids talk about popularity as just one lump thing. Mm-hmm. And it's not. There's a lot of complexity to popularity and what actually is happening there and how can we talk about that in a different way? Mm-hmm. And what are the qualities you actually want to cultivate in yourself?
Fascinating. Well, I'm thinking that this is a must read for middle school teachers and administrators.
I hope so. I put a curriculum guide together because my dream is, I feel like this is great, first year reading in a language arts class because there's lots of things to talk about. So yeah, I have a whole curriculum guide with the book and I'd love it if classes talked about it together, because it does shine a light on all the tricky, uncomfortable stuff in a really honest and humorous way. Like I tried to throw in a lot of humor, a lot of science. So I feel like once we shine a light on these things, it just makes a lot more sense. And we could choose our own behaviors with a lot more clarity once we know the reasons behind behaviors. Yeah.
And I'm thinking, too, that this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. I'm thinking that Middle School Safety Goggles Advised would be a really good book for parents and kids to read together or co-read and then talk about over dinner on the way to ballet or soccer or to school.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one thing for sure will help parents get their head back in these middle school years because they're going to read these stories like, oh, yes, I totally remember that. And then we as parents can be more empathic. We can really understand what our students are going through.
And I think that that's a great way to approach the discussions as opposed to sitting down and, all right, Johnny, in chapter 1, Jessica said this. Is that happening with you? And instead just sit down and, oh, man, that takes me back to when I was in middle school and I experienced this and I was a jerk. This happened to me. And, start the conversations in that way, revealing something of yourself. And,
yes.
And not pushing your kid. I've a great comment that I've used many times in many different situations is, hey, if I ever ask you a question that makes you feel uncomfortable, that you don't want to answer me, just let me know. And we can move on. And every time I've said that and then followed it with a question, I've gotten everything and more come out. It's
awesome.
Crazy.
Yes, it's so true. I mean, by middle school, our kids want our advice a lot less. We turn into more of a sounding board and emotional coach and cheerleader, because, we really don't have our pulse on what's happening. We have our own experiences, but it's hard for us to truly understand, what they're going through. So the more we can listen, to them, and so they know that they're a safe place, we as parents are a safe place for them to share, we're going to have a better chance of keeping those conversations going with our kids.
Yeah. Hey, this is a good time to ask you, where's a safe place to find out more about middle school safety goggles advice and find out more about you?
The easiest place is my website, which is Jessica Speer, SPEER.com, and that's got links off to all my social. It's got links to where the book is sold. You can pretty much buy the book anywhere books are sold. If you're supporting your local indie, just ask them for it. They can access that, but Target.com and Barnes & Noble. But yeah, just my website, and I'd love to connect. Feel free to shoot me any questions you've got. Thank you for sharing that.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of Middle School Safety Goggles Advised, and there's a big, long subtitle. Tell us the subtitle.
Okay, the subtitle is Exploring the Weird Stuff, from Gossip to Grades, Clicks to Crushes, Popularity to Peer Pressure.
And Jessica had to read that, too. She didn't.
I know. I should know that by now, but I actually pick up the book and I read it. I'm going to get that, though, Jedley. I'm going to get that.
Our guest has been Jessica Speer. Jessica, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks so much, Jedley.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Tim Wright. He'll be here to celebrate the adventures of Toby Baxter. This is a fantastic middle grade novel, and Tim has a lot of insight and has done a lot of research into rites of passage, and that's what the Toby Baxter, the adventures of Toby Baxter are all about. It's a fascinating conversation. You don't want to miss it. That's the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Hey, another thing you don't want to miss if you are anywhere in the New England area on August 6, 2022 is Reading with Your Kids Day at the Buttonwood Park Zoo in beautiful New Bedford, Massachusetts. We're going to be bringing all sorts of magic to the zoo, authors who will be interviewed, authors who will be reading their stories aloud. We'll be giving away loads and loads and loads of books, and hopefully we'll be getting a chance to talk to some of you. It's all happening 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Buttonwood Park Zoo in beautiful New Bedford, Massachusetts, August 6, 2022. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we're going to start by thanking our guest, Jessica Speer. Please be sure to check out Middle School Safety Goggles Advised. Also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Nicole Belcastro, Mirabella Q, Rain Penn. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.